The day my father died, something inside Victoria changed. The mask of the caring stepmother fell away, revealing the person she'd always been beneath the surface. I'm Alexandra Chen, Alex to my friends, and I watched my father battle cancer for 18 months before he finally slipped away. In those final weeks, he'd grown increasingly anxious, not about death, but about what would happen after. Alex, he whispered during one of his last lucid moments, pressing a sealed envelope into my hands. Keep this safe. Don't open it until after everything. Promise me. I promised, tucking the envelope into my jacket pocket as Victoria swept into the room, all designer clothes and forced concern. She'd married my father 3 years ago, when I was 22, and had spent those years carefully orchestrating her role as the devoted wife. Now, standing in our family home the day after his funeral, that facade was gone. I want you out by tomorrow, she said, examining her manicured nails as if discussing the weather. Your father's will left everything to me, and I don't need you hanging around like some charity case. I stood in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by memories. This was my mother's house before she died. Dad would never. Your father did exactly that, she cut in, producing a document from her Hermes bag. Single beneficiary. Me. Everything from the house to his company shares. So pack your things, Alexandra. Your free ride is over. The will looked legitimate, but something felt off. Dad had always been meticulous about his affairs, especially after losing my mother to a car accident when I was 12. He'd raised me alone for 10 years before meeting Victoria, teaching me everything about our family business, our investments, our legacy. You have until tomorrow morning, Victoria said, turning to leave. She paused at the door. Oh, and don't bother taking anything valuable. I'll be checking your bags. As soon as she left, I pulled out the envelope Dad had given me. My hands shook as I broke the seal, finding a letter and a small key inside. My dearest Alex, if you're reading this, then my fears about Victoria were justified. The will she has is not the real one. I discovered her true nature too late, but I made arrangements to protect you and our family's legacy. Go to Safety Deposit Box 247 at First National. Everything you need is there. I'm sorry I brought her into our lives. I was lonely after your mother, and Victoria was very convincing. But you were always my priority, sweetheart. Always. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, my heart pounding. Then I carefully tucked it away and began packing, not the designer clothes Victoria assumed I'd take, but photos, my mother's old jewelry, and the family albums that traced our history before Victoria appeared. That night, I called my best friend Sophia. Of course you can stay with me, she said immediately. But Alex, you need to fight this. Your dad wouldn't leave you with nothing. I know, I said quietly. And I think he didn't, but I need to play this carefully. Victoria is dangerous when she feels threatened. I'd seen glimpses of it over the years, the calculated manipulation, the subtle threats to household staff who displeased her, the way she'd slowly isolated my father from his old friends. She'd even tried to convince him to send me to graduate school abroad, probably hoping to get me out of the picture entirely. The next morning, I let her search my bags, watching her face fall when she found nothing of obvious value. She didn't notice the small key hanging on a chain around my neck, or the letter tucked into my worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, the last birthday gift from my mother. Don't expect any handouts, she said as I walked toward the door. Your father's company will be under new management. Your internship there is obviously terminated. I turned to look at her one last time, this woman who thought she'd won everything. Goodbye, Victoria. Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. Her eyes narrowed at my calm tone, probably expecting tears or begging. But I'd learned from my father that the best moves in business and life were made with a clear head and careful planning. The bank wouldn't open for another hour, so I drove to my father's favorite coffee shop, ordering his usual dark roast out of habit. The barista, Maria, gave me a sympathetic smile. We miss seeing your dad, she said softly. He always said this place reminded him of your mom. They had their first date here, right? I nodded, memories flooding back. Dad had kept coming here all these years, even after Victoria complained it wasn't sophisticated enough for someone of his status. It was one of the few battles he'd won. As I sat waiting for the bank to open, I thought about the last 3 years, Victoria's whirlwind courtship of my father, the lavish wedding, her gradual takeover of our lives. She'd played her role perfectly. Right up until Dad took his last breath. But my father hadn't been a fool. Despite his loneliness after Mom died, despite wanting to believe in love again, he clearly seen through Victoria at the end. And he prepared for this moment. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into First National Bank, the key feeling heavy around my neck. Whatever was in that safety deposit box would either confirm my hopes or destroy them completely. I just didn't realize then how much it would change everything, not just for me, but for Victoria and everyone else who'd underestimated my father's foresight and my determination to protect his legacy. The bank manager, Mr. Peterson, had known my father for decades. His face softened when he saw me. "Miss Chen, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." "Thank you," I said, pulling out the key. "I need to access box 247. He nodded, leading me to the vault. "Of course. Your father was very specific about this box. Only you can access it. Even as his widow, Mrs. Chen has no rights to it." I smiled slightly, imagining Victoria's fury if she knew. The safety deposit box contained a thick envelope and a USB drive. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope, revealing document after document that would turn Victoria's perfect plan upside down. But I forced myself to stay calm, to think strategically like Dad had taught me. Victoria thought she had all the time in the world to enjoy her victory. She had no idea what was coming. The contents of the safety deposit box changed everything. Inside the envelope, I found the real will properly notarized and filed with Dad's longtime attorney. Bank statements showing Victoria's systematic theft from company accounts. Private investigator reports detailing her history of marrying wealthy men who conveniently died. A USB drive containing security footage from Dad's home office. And most importantly, proof that she'd been slowly poisoning him. My hands shook as I read through everything. Dad hadn't just died of cancer. Victoria had accelerated his decline, careful to use substances that mimicked his symptoms. The private investigator had uncovered similar patterns with her 2 previous husbands. I copied everything, storing duplicates in multiple secure locations. Then I called Thomas Wright, Dad's attorney and oldest friend. "I've been waiting for your call," he said when we met at his office. "Your father came to me 6 months ago when he first suspected something was wrong. We've been building the case ever since. Why didn't he tell me sooner?" Thomas sighed. "He wanted to protect you. Victoria had already made veiled threats about your safety. He needed to make sure everything was ironclad before she could retaliate." The real will painted a very different picture from Victoria's version. The house, the company, most of the assets, all went to me. Victoria received only what was specified in their prenuptial agreement, a modest monthly allowance and a small condo Dad had purchased before their marriage. "She's going to fight this," I said. "Let her," Thomas smiled grimly. "Your father made sure we have everything we need. But Alex, there's something else you should know." He pulled out another file. "Your father suspected Victoria might try something drastic when the will was revealed. He set up surveillance in the house. Everything's being recorded. And there's a team watching her every move." I thought about Victoria in my childhood home, probably already planning to sell off family heirlooms and restructure the company. She had no idea she was being watched, documented, trapped by her own actions. "How do you want to handle this?" Thomas asked. I considered my options. We could move legally right away. But Victoria was cunning. She might destroy evidence or worse if she felt cornered. Let her think she's won, I decided. Give her enough rope to hang herself. Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as Victoria began dismantling my father's legacy. She fired longtime employees, brought in her own people, and started selling off company assets. Each move was documented, each illegal transaction recorded. I stayed with Sophia, working part-time at a local bookstore while secretly meeting with Thomas and the investigation team. Victoria's past began unraveling. Her previous marriages, mysterious deaths, disappeared fortunes. Then came the moment that sealed her fate. Security cameras caught her in Dad's office, speaking on the phone with someone about the special supplements she'd been adding to his food and medication. It worked perfectly, she gloated. Just like with Harold and Stephen. Those cancer symptoms, so convenient for masking other things. And his precious daughter never suspected a thing. I watched the footage with cold fury. Thomas placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "We have enough," he said. "It's time." The next morning, Victoria swept into the company offices, ready for another day of playing CEO. Instead, she found federal agents, forensic accountants, and me sitting calmly in what had once been my father's chair. "Hello, Victoria," I said quietly. "We need to talk about what really happened to my father." The color drained from her face as Thomas began laying out documents, bank records, medical reports, surveillance footage, the real will. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered. "You can't prove anything." "Actually," said a federal agent, stepping forward, "we can prove quite a lot, including what happened to your previous husbands." Victoria's carefully constructed world began crumbling. But as they led her away in handcuffs, she turned to me with pure hatred. "You're just like your father," she spat. "Always thinking you're so clever." I smiled, thinking of Dad's meticulous planning. "Thank you," I said. "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." As she disappeared into the back of a federal vehicle, I sat in my father's office, my office now, and finally allowed myself to grieve. Not just for Dad, but for the time he'd lost to Victoria's deception. But he'd had the last word after all, and now it was my turn to protect and build upon his legacy. The real work was just beginning. 1 year later, I sat in my father's old office, reviewing quarterly reports. The company had not just recovered from Victoria's brief reign of terror, it was thriving. But more importantly, justice had been served. Victoria's trial had been swift and decisive. The evidence Dad gathered proved not just her crimes against him, but also led to murder convictions for her previous husbands. She was sentenced to life without parole, her carefully crafted world of wealth and manipulation reduced to a prison cell. "Ms. Chen," my assistant Sarah poked her head in. "The foundation paperwork is ready for your signature." The James Chen Foundation was my way of honoring Dad's memory. We focus on funding cancer research and supporting victims of financial fraud. Every grant approval reminded me of his final gift, not the money or the company, but the lesson that true legacy isn't about wealth, but about making a difference. I picked up the silver frame on my desk, a photo of Dad and me at my college graduation, both of us beaming. Next to it sat the letter he'd given me, now framed as a reminder of his foresight and love. "You would have loved this," I whispered to his photo. "The foundation, the company's growth, everything we're building." My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. "Thought you'd want to know. Victoria's appeal was denied. It's really over." I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Later that evening, I drove to my parents' cemetery, placing fresh flowers on both graves. "Hey, Dad," I said softly, "you can rest easy now. I protected our legacy just like you protected me." The company had doubled its charitable giving under my leadership, focusing particularly on programs that helped identify and prevent elder abuse and financial fraud. Every success felt like a victory not just for me, but for Dad and others like him who'd fallen prey to people like Victoria. The house remained exactly as Mom had designed it, though I'd added my own touches. Victoria's expensive renovations were gone, replaced by the warm, familiar style that had made it a home for so many years. Sophia, who'd given me shelter during those difficult days, was now my head of corporate communications. "Your father would be so proud," she said one evening as we shared takeout in my office, "not just of the business success, but of how you've handled everything." She was right. Dad had taught me that true strength isn't about revenge, but about building something meaningful from adversity. The company wasn't just profitable, it was making a real difference in people's lives. The media occasionally tried to revive the Black Widow CEO story, but I refused all interviews about Victoria. She didn't deserve any more attention. Instead, I focused on the future, on building something that honored both my parents' memory. In my father's final letter, he'd written, "Remember, Alex, success isn't measured by what you have, but by what you do with it." Those words became my guiding principle. 3 years after Victoria's arrest, I received a letter from her. I recognized her precise handwriting on the envelope, but I didn't open it. Some chapters are better left closed. Instead, I focused on the Foundation's latest initiative, a program to help children who lost parents to cancer. In the conference room, photographs of grant recipients lined the walls, each smiling face a reminder that good could come from even the darkest circumstances. "Your father always said you'd surpass him," Thomas remarked during a board meeting. "He'd be amazed to see how right he was." But I knew the truth. Everything I'd achieved was built on the foundation Dad created, not just of wealth, but of love, integrity, and determination. Victoria had tried to destroy that legacy, but she'd only made it stronger. Every morning, I walked into the office that had once been my father's, now mine, and saw the framed motto on the wall. Words Dad had lived by: build something worthy of those who came before you, and inspiring to those who come after. That's exactly what I was doing, not just running a company or managing wealth, but creating a legacy of positive change. Victoria had taught me the worst of human nature, but Dad's final gift had shown me the best: the power of foresight, love, and justice. As I signed another grant approval for the foundation, I smiled, knowing that somewhere, Dad was smiling too. We'd beaten Victoria not just in court, but by building something she could never understand. A legacy of genuine value, of lives changed and hope restored. That was worth more than all the wealth she tried to steal, and it was only the beginning.